first thing I want to do is say thank you. Thank you for showing up at NASPA. Thank you for showing up in this room. Thank you for being who you are. That's what I first want to impart is thank you. Now I want to ask you a question. How many of you have ever said to someone, I need you to have some class, be classy, or act professional? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Own it. Own your behavior. I've done it too, right? Now I want you to think to yourself, has anybody ever said that to me? Has anybody ever said to me, you need to have some class, act classy, or be professional? Yeah, I hear some, yeah, you can own, yeah, me, right here. And I want you to think about how did that make you feel? In that moment, how did that make you feel? Maybe it was a gut check for you, and you were like, they might be right? Or maybe you were like, how dare you say that to me? And I want that to be a starter question for us, to think about how sometimes we are on both sides of that conversation. Personally, I have been on both sides of that conversation. I have had multiple people tell me to have class, be classy, or act professional, and I have at times said that to other people as well. And that makes me uncomfortable. Both sides of that conversation make me very uncomfortable. And so I want to use my time today to talk about why that makes me uncomfortable and what that means and how that relates to a component of my class identity. Before I start talking about class identity, I want to own that class is just one component of our identity. And that component, right, is influenced by and influences every other dimension of our identity. So when I speak about being working class and from a poor and working class background, I do that as somebody who's also white, who's also straight, who's also temporarily able-bodied, who's also identifies as a cisgender woman, who's a Cajun, who's a Catholic, right? So I speak about it from that lens, knowing that my experience of being poor and working class in my background is different than maybe your experience if you also identify that way. So owning that it's a component of my identity, but it's influenced by a lot of other things as well. But I also want to talk about class, and to use a phrase that my colleague, fellow scholar, and friend, Becky Martinez says is, let's talk class. And she says that because we don't often talk about it in higher ed. Now we're talking about it more. We're seeing that more in higher ed, but we're seeing it from a lot of times from coded language. So we don't talk necessarily about poor and working class students or poor and working class professionals. We talk about first-gen students. We talk about Pell-eligible students. We talk about open access. We talk about selective. Right? We talk about need-based aid versus merit-based aid. And we use all that coded language because we have been socialized from when we're very little to believe that we don't talk about money and we don't talk about class. That is a taboo topic in a lot of spaces. And that is a challenge because my class identity is a huge part of who I am. So if I can't talk about that, I can't be all of who I am. I can't share all of my experiences, my knowledge, my skill set, because I can't bring all of who I am to that experience. So I'm going to ask us to think a little bit about it today. But I want us to be on the same page about what class identity is. A lot of times we associate class identity with money. Raise your hand for me if that is often your most association, is class identity and financial capital or money. A lot of times that is our immediate association, which is great, it's fine. That is part of the definition. So money or wealth, so it might be how much is in your bank account, how much is in your paycheck, if you own a car, if you own a house. So it's having us think about those things, and that's important, and it's not the entire definition of class identity. It is a partial definition. And so I would like us to expand our thinking in higher education around the definitions of class identity. Fixing students or our own money problems doesn't fix all of our class problems. Right? We can throw money all day at things, but that doesn't necessarily always alleviate or make it easier to retain students or to fix our own kind of situations. Rather, I would offer Tara Yosso's model of community cultural wealth. You can Google it and find the entire model and the entire article. But essentially what Yosso talks about is that we have all kinds of capital as part of our class identity. So yes, the financial capital is there, but we also have to think about our cultural capital, right? How do we dress? What do our teeth look like? What do our shoes look like? Where have we been? Are we able to go on vacation? If we are, is it to a museum, right? Or is it to the middle of nowhere, which is where I'm on vacation, places like Hot Springs, Arkansas? What does that look like for us? Our linguistic capital. When I turn on my accent in Boston, Massachusetts, people make assumptions about me, right? About that I'm Southern, what that means, what does that look like? So that linguistic capital is important. Navigational capital. Do we know how to navigate the systems that we are in? As a first-gen student, right, who now has a PhD, I hold both of those together, and I have to think about the academy will always feel a little bit off for me because I don't have the same kind of navigational capital that maybe some of my colleagues who grew up middle class or upper class have that kind of navigational capital. Also, resistant capital. That means, can we look at a system, right, from the class lens and say, this shit is bad, and think about, do I have enough kind of gusto to say, this system is bad, and how can we work towards fixing it? So having that resistant capital as well. We all have varying kinds of capital. That doesn't mean it's always valued. So I have a lot of social capital. I know a lot of crawfish farmers. I know a lot of people who work on offshore oil rigs. The academy doesn't care. They don't care that I know those people. That is not valuable in that context. And so I would offer us to think about, are we sometimes looking at students from a deficit lens and looking at ourselves from a deficit lens versus saying we have all kinds of capitals and how do we value them and how do we harness them to make the higher education environment better? Alfred Lubrano gives us a definition of class, talking about class as a script, a map, or a guide, something that really influences how we dress, how we eat, how we talk, right? How we essentially hold ourselves. And his definition really resonates with me. I read the book Limbo, Blue Collar Roots, White Collar Dreams on the way to NASPA 3 years ago. And it was really an aha moment for me because it gave me a different lens and construct to view some really hard challenges I was having in my professional career. And I thought it's about being a woman or it's about being first gen. And when I read the book, I was like, damn, this is the answer. It's about class identity. And so that book was really an aha moment for me, and it really brought me down this path of exploring class identity and being okay saying, yes, I grew up poor and working class. Because people make a lot of assumptions about class identity. When I walk down the street or walk around NASPA dressed like this, people make assumptions about how I grew up potentially or how I currently identify my class. People don't know, right, that I'm a first-gen student necessarily. Maybe they do. They don't know that it's a challenge for me to bring people to my parents' home because part of the floor is missing. They don't know that when I was a little kid, right, we went to the grocery store, we only had $20, and that was it. And I had to do the math to figure out how we were gonna eat. So we make all these assumptions about people's class identity because we don't ask the right questions, or we don't wanna listen to their story. In higher education, I think a lot of times we view our field as a way of social mobility. And I would argue sometimes it's just a further entrenchment of social stratification. Because we use Carnegie classifications, we use US News and World Report rankings, we use hiring practices, admissions philosophies to further entrench the status quo in a lot of cases. So I would ask us to examine those and think, are we really helping social mobility, or are we just further entrenching the status quo that exists? Personally, right now, I identify as a class straddler, right? So if you've ever been on a state line, so for those of you from the South, there's a place called Floribama between Florida and Alabama. It's a bar. And if you straddle kind of the state line, you're like, I'm in Alabama, I'm in Florida, I'm in Alabama, I'm in Florida. That's how I feel about class identity. Some of me is poor and working class, some of me is middle to upper class. And I go back and forth and back and forth. And what that means for me is that I feel like I fit in both places and neither place. I can talk my hometown talk, and that's part of me. I can talk the academy talk, and that's part of me, but neither fits 100%. So I will never feel like I fit in either one fully, and I can play in both spaces. So that's both a privilege, right, and a disadvantage in some respects. And so I would offer you to think about what does that mean for your colleagues, what does that mean for students, as we kind of have to code switch and play between two different environments, and that my family never will fully understand what I do. It's also very saddening to me that sometimes my parents will say, I don't want to come to an event on campus when they're visiting because they say, I'm going to make you embarrassed. And so that's really hard because they know it's a different construct than one that they can easily operate in, and they don't want to make me look bad because they know that I'm operating in a different game, right? And that's challenging because I want them to come in, I want them to see, and I want them to experience. And sometimes that's really hard. This term Unprofessionalism, I think, is a way in higher ed we discredit, degrade folks who identify as poor and working class. Because we identify for them how they can dress, how they can talk, what they should eat, what they should drink at a happy hour, and all of these different constructs. And so it doesn't really resonate with me very well, but I think this article from Everyday Feminism in 2015 really speaks to it. And the article talks about how professionalism is a social construct. We made it up. And yet we're all trying to follow this script that it's not made for all of us. So I spoke this morning in a session. I said, you know, a lot of times people tell me that my 4-letter words that I like to use, shit is one of my favorite words, by the way, that the 4-letter word I use makes me unprofessional. And there are some colleagues I have, I'm a faculty member, there are some colleagues I have that use what I call $100 words when they don't need to, right? So when you talk to me about epistemological stance and you know, any other kind of phrase you want to use that I call $100 word when a $10 word would do, why can you use that and I can't use my 4-letter word? Because we're valuing the upper and middle class and kind of academic capital, and we're not valuing my experience, right, and how I get my point across. It also talks about that professionalism is really about straight white maleness and affluence above everything else. And so we are trying to conform to something that may not fit for us and we may not want to fit into. And when we think about class, I can be blunt, I like 4-letter words, and I will pick a beer and a koozie any day over wine. And so thinking, it's true. I gave up beer for Lent though, so if you see me later with a drink, it's because I gave up beer for Lent. And the academy, I find a lot of challenges in my work life because of these things. And I'm not willing to give up these things to be successful in the academy because that's not who I am. And if I can't be who I am, right, and that's a privilege to be able to do that, if I can't be who I am in the academy, I'm not sure it's the right space for me. And so I would argue we have some students, some staff, and some professionals, some faculty who are going to leave our space if we can't think about how we can include them in this space. And so my ask is that we can all think about how can we let people be who they are in their class identity in our colleges and universities so that we can add their value, add their capitals, and celebrate all of our identity. Thank you.